Alright, true believers, if you saw Avengers Endgame and thought, hey, something's missing, where's that shot of all the Avengers walking together from the trailer? Or, hey, where's that scene where our heroes have a dance-off with Thanos? Or, hey, why is this movie 3 hours long when it should have been 5 hours plus intermission? Then this video's for you. We here at ScreenRant have a list of scenes that were removed from Endgame. Whether they were deleted from the finished film or just fake scenes put into the trailer to keep fans guessing, we've got scenes that'll leave you shook, moments that will baffle you, and moments that will make you wish Thanos had snapped again. Altered scenes, assemble! Perhaps the biggest scene cut from Avengers Endgame would have come at the end. Originally, rumors were swirling that Catherine Langford was cast in an unnamed role. When she didn't appear in the finished film, fans wondered whether she was even involved in the first place. Langford was cast in the film, but she wasn't intended to be Kathy Bishop, a female Hawkeye. No, she was actually cast as Morgan Stark, Tony's daughter. Teenage Morgan was supposed to appear to Tony after he snapped his fingers. It was intended for Tony to visit the same red-hued metaphysical way station where Thanos sees a young Gamora in Infinity War. It was here that teen Morgan was to assure Tony that what he did was right, and she forgave him for sacrificing himself. When test audiences saw the scene, they were left more confused than satisfied, and the sequence was cut. Most of us can agree that heavy-set Thor was the breakout star of Endgame, and with those extra pounds, Thor all duded out Big Lebowski style is the hero we never knew we wanted, and the hero we deserved. But how would he fare against his younger, fitter self? Well, we would have discovered this when Fat Thor faced off against Dark World Thor, when the former was time-traveling to Asgard. It was ultimately cut because the Russos felt it detracted from the momentum building up during the Act 2 time travel scenes. And it stole the thunder, unintended, from the Captain America vs. Captain America fight at Stark Tower. In choosing between a Cap vs. Cap or a Thor vs. Thor battle, we'd prefer the moment where Steve Rogers realized his rear was the most patriotic thing on screen. Infinity War may have had Avengers in its title, but the movie belongs to Thanos just as much as it does to our titular heroes. With Thanos taken out so early in Endgame, the role of big bad villain was taken by Thanos from the past. Many fans stated that it was hard to feel the same animosity for a villain who hadn't yet committed the dastardly snap of Infinity War. However, a sequence was reportedly in the works which provided us with more of Thanos' backstory. In it, we would have seen Thanos as a young man on Titan, ultimately trying to tell others that his planet needed to take drastic measures to save itself. Eventually, we would have seen him imprisoned, and from there we would have witnessed his planet tear itself apart. This sequence would have shown us Thanos as a kind of anti-Jor-El. Originally, the sequence on Morag, which gave us a decent dose of humor, was going to involve more of an action set piece than what we saw on screen. We all enjoyed getting a new view of the opening scene from the first Guardians of the Galaxy, especially learning what Star-Lord is like when we can't hear the fun soundtrack underscoring his antics. Spoiler alert! Peter Quill treats action sequences the way many of us treat showers, a time for singing while we take care of business. Still, the Russos stated that the characters of Black Widow, Hawkeye, Nebula, and War Machine would originally arrive on Morag before Star-Lord, and they had to navigate the planet's terrain while it was under some tide-induced flooding. We do like what ultimately ended up on screen. It's a shame we never got to see them fight a sea creature, though. While we got to catch a glimpse of Natalie Portman in the Thor the Dark World Asgard time travel sequence, Thor was noticeably lacking a love interest in this Avengers flick. While Endgame's Thor may be less healthy than his earlier self, it's undeniable that there was some on-screen chemistry between Thor and Valkyrie. Apparently the two characters were originally going to share a smooch as well, or at least almost a kiss. According to the directors, toward the end of the film, when Thor basically says that Valkyrie is the best possible ruler for New Asgard, she puts her hand on his shoulder, and Thor, mistaking this for a romantic moment, moves in for a kiss. Valkyrie recoils and things get humorously awkward from there. The scene may have been, but we look forward to more misread signals in any forthcoming Asgardians of the Galaxy films. Thor and Nebula, anybody? While Tony obviously needed some recovery time after being trapped on a powerless spaceship at the beginning of the film, and he certainly had 5 years to get better, it was a bit jarring to see Tony Stark so weak at the start of Endgame. For a character usually full of life, his frail frame was a shocking sight, and a testament to the Marvel Studios special effects team, who by now have made Stark appear wounded, malnourished, and several decades younger. For the Endgame trailers, they showed us moments from scenes where Stark is unfed and drifting through space, but his body appeared to be at RDJ's normal healthy weight. This may be because the trailers were released before visual effects were completed on the film, or they just wanted to surprise us even more in the upcoming scenes of the movie. Captain Marvel's original film was a big success for Marvel Studios, and an answer to the DCEU's hugely popular Wonder Woman. It helped prove to film executives that women could anchor hugely successful action franchises. Sure, we knew this from Sigourney Weaver's turn in the Alien franchise and from Linda Hamilton's roles in Terminator 1 and 2, but it was nice to be reminded in our modern era. While the trailers for Endgame still made it clear that Captain Marvel would be involved in the film's action, they didn't present the character wearing her signature Mohawk helmet. Perhaps this was because they didn't want to reveal to the audience that Carol Danvers would be sporting her classic short hairdo for the film. Don't want to get fanboys and girls too excited before the film's release now, do we? One of the best moments in the film, and possibly the MCU in general, was Stark's retort to Thanos before he did his table-turning snap at the end of Endgame. Everyone who's seen the film know that Robert Downey Jr. basically begins and practically ends his career as Iron Man with the same declarative statement saying,
"I am Iron Man."
Thanos always said, "I'm inevitable," before Tony eventually won the day. But it wasn't until the Russos had dinner with Robert Downey Jr. and Joel Silver that they had pitched to the actor an idea that their editor had conceived. The Russos, their editor, and Joel Silver agreed that having Stark say, "I am Iron Man," in response to Thanos was icing on the cake. So they reshot the sequence, adding in the line, and the rest is history. For all the breathtaking action that occurs in the last act of the film, there was actually a mid-battle meetup between our heroes and their friends. They regrouped during a lull in the fighting to strategize their last stand against Thanos. However, this lull also tended to slow the action and dull the audience's enjoyment of the finale, so it was cut. While the overall battle was originally much longer, with the writers of the film stating it was plotted out with a 3-act structure of its own, the writers, Stephen McFeely and Christopher Marcus, felt that having all the characters stand around and propose ideas for what they could be doing was far less interesting than having characters toss shields, throw hammers, and Hulk smash their way through enemy lines. Early trailers for Endgame also gave us more of a Thor that we don't really see in the movie. Previews gave us footage of Thor in his old tip-top shape, and plus he also wielded Stormbreaker in moments when he doesn't really use it in the finished film. While Thor was the one to cut off Thanos' head, Thor just isn't the same guy he used to be. But since the trailers didn't want to give any of this plot point away, they distracted us by giving us footage that was likely shot during Infinity War. It was a smart marketing move from the MCU that kept us guessing about the scope of the God of Thunder's involvement. Of all the heroes in the MCU, and yes, there's a ton of them, not many have had as big of a journey as Nebula. The Ladybot has had what would amount to the opposite of a heel turn, giving us an intense and vengeful character who's just as misunderstood and in need of love as she is deadly. To capitalize on our expectations of Nebula, the trailer included a shot of her charging into battle. Based on the lighting and tone of the footage shown in the Endgame trailer, many fans likely assumed that this clip of Nebula was taken from the final fight. However, this iteration of Karen Gillan's character isn't even the Nebula we've come to know at this point in the franchise. Actually, it's the Nebula from the past, when she's battling against enemy creatures near Gamora. While we were treated to some fast, smooth, and deadly action in Japan at the mercy of Hawkeye's swordplay, the trailer teased more intrigue for Black Widow in Tokyo, a moment that we never got to see in Black Widow's Japanese adventure. Footage from the last trailer for the film depicts Black Widow seated in a Japanese yard at night. She's wearing a hooded jacket in the rain, but no hood. Either she doesn't care about her hair getting wet or she's ruminating, so deep in thought that she doesn't even notice. Was this during her search for Hawkeye, or was this a totally separate event that we'll never fully comprehend? We knew that all the Avengers, at least those unaffected by the Great Dusting of 2018, would appear in the film, yet we had no idea what shape they'd be in, especially since many fans were unaware that there would be a 5-year time jump featured in the movie. With that in mind, Marvel Studios decided to adjust many of the team shots featured in the trailers, either editing out characters entirely or changing their looks. One instance of the latter case was when Captain America, Thor, and Iron Man faced Thanos in the final battle. In the version from the trailer, Thor's hammer was removed from Captain America's hands, and Thor was wearing his signature cape to hide the fact that he'd gained weight in the finished film. At Avengers headquarters, the floating screens appear regularly, giving our heroes status updates on the many problems Earth faces in the wake of Thanos' snap. But the trailer featured a misleading clip of Bruce Banner covering his face with his hands. We're meant to believe that Banner is in anguish as portraits of fallen superheroes turned to dust by Thanos appear on the screens. This is another moment that didn't appear in the finished film. In fact, in the 5 years that passed since the events of Infinity War, Bruce seems to be one of the more well-adjusted heroes, having come to terms with the green guy inside and become Professor Hulk. The Marvel Studios marketing team went to great lengths to alter shots for the trailers, not only to keep things secret, but to stoop to levels that not even Mr. Mystery Box himself, J.J. Abrams, would go in misdirecting the fans. But hey, for a film as hotly anticipated as Endgame, the measures were necessary. Particularly when they removed Giant Man from the shot in which he loomed behind Rocket and War Machine. The clip comes from the final battle, and while it provided us a glimpse of War Machine's updated armor and previewed the fact that the two characters share screen time, it didn't give away the fact that Ant-Man survived the snap and figured heavily in the Endgame story. The trailers artfully avoided us showing Thor's heavier frame in the movie, but we were given a glimpse of the God of Thunder's abode in New Asgard. A shot revealed Rocket entering the seaside hut that Thor calls home. That said, it fails to include the Hulk. Marvel Studios removed the big green Bruce Banner from the shot for obvious reasons. They wanted to keep the reveal of Bruce Banner's Professor Hulk form from the audience. So instead, they just left the audience wondering what Rocket is doing entering a seaside home when there's obviously more important things to worry about. But hey, maybe fans thought Rocket had retired and became a cute, fuzzy little fisherman in the time between Infinity War and Endgame, like a little raccoon. One shot from the finished film features Hawkeye fleeing from Thanos' minions. In Endgame, Hawkeye carries the gauntlet as he sprints away from his enemies. Trailers contained this shot, edited to simply show Jeremy Renner running from the explosion, the kind of sequence that any self-respecting action movie would use to promote itself. The problem is, Marvel failed to remove Thanos' henchmen from 3D versions of this trailer. So fans who have the stomach for 3D or just happen to be up to date on their movie gossip were well aware that Hawkeye would get chased at some point in the film. Black Widow's hair has changed throughout the series, whether long and curly in Iron Man 2 or short and bouncy in the first two Avengers films. Her wigs are on point. She dyed her hair blonde for Infinity War, and one of the trailers actually maintained this look to misdirect viewers. In the preview, Ant-Man arrives at Avengers headquarters to the shock of our heroes. In order to keep the audience from recognizing the surprise time jump from the start of the film, Marvel Studios CGI'd blonde hair onto Scarlett Johansson. Luckily for her, she looks great in any hair color and style. And it doesn't hurt that she can take care of herself. Footage of Black Widow training at Avengers headquarters and shooting targets across a room was cut. Black Widow had plenty of other time to show her great fighting skills. For a middle-aged guy like Jeremy Renner, he can still sport the hairdo of a hippie youngin'. But we guess that's what happens when your family no longer exists and you have nothing else to live for. Hey, at least he can pull it off. And if you have to grieve, you might as well grieve in style. Speaking of grieving, a trailer did feature a shot of Hawkeye looking all mopey by a lake. Without context, it's just a moody scene where the character could be saddened by any number of losses. Little did we know at the time that this moment is where Hawkeye mourns the loss of Black Widow after returning from Vormir. Thanks to the reveals of hefty Thor and Professor Hulk relatively early in Endgame, they didn't get much love in the trailers. This was a conscious decision on the part of Marvel Studios so that fans didn't get these characters' plot twists ruined before the film even came out. One of the more popular shots from the trailers featured most of the team standing in the office of Avengers headquarters, wearing plain clothes and staring intently toward the camera. While Hawkeye, Rhodey, Iron Man, Captain America, Nebula, Rocket, Ant-Man, and Black Widow are standing in the shot, Bruce Banner is by Rhodey, and Thor is seated in the finished film. The two characters were also edited out of the popular shot of the cast and their time travel suits, as they strut in slow motion right stuff style. While we got an idea of the tone of Endgame from the trailers, Marvel's creative team wisely went out of their way to keep most of the plot under wraps. Most fans were in the dark about Thanos' early death, and many likely assumed that the film would take place right after Infinity War and hit the ground running. Shots from the trailer, like Steve Rogers with a tear-stained cheek as he sits at Avengers headquarters, gave us the clear picture that things were still not going to be easy for our heroes in this climactic chapter. The shot of grieving Steve also had Tony Stark digitally removed so that fans were kept guessing as to whether he made it back to Earth from Titan. As we said before, the final battle was obviously a huge focus on the creative team. While it was meticulously plotted and carefully executed, with characters involved from throughout the history of the MCU, it was heavily reshaped in the editing room. The Russo brothers recently revealed that the battle included many special reunion moments for characters separated since Infinity War by Thanos' snap. The directors particularly mentioned poignant moments between Ant-Man and the Wasp, as well as Rocket and Groot, who managed to reconnect amidst the chaos in the battle. While these scenes were likely very heartfelt, they also detracted from the action at hand, and the directors rightfully figured we'd get to spend more quality time with these characters in later MCU installments. The battle, set against a signature post-apocalyptic landscape over the ruins of Avengers headquarters, was teased in the trailers. and eagle-eyed fans likely figured that moments from this sequence were probably from the finale of the film. But they were spared some of the more major details, like Captain America's broken shield. In 2 separate shots from the pre-release marketing footage, Cap's shield was digitally altered to appear fully intact. This way, fans weren't spoiled by the fact that it's broken in the movie. A wise decision that kept us unaware of the danger Cap is put in, as well as the fact that he ends up wielding Mjolnir. Many reports of time travel had leaked to fans, thanks to widely distributed spoilers and reports from the set. There was a lot of word going around that the cast were spotted wearing costumes from previous movies during principal photography. Principally, Cap was seen wearing his bright costume from the 2012 Avengers film. A shot from the trailer actually featured a scene of Steve Rogers and Tony Stark standing in 2012 New York, from Endgame's time travel sequence. In it, the 2 men shake hands and set aside differences that have existed since Civil War. The only difference in the trailer is that the footage was altered so that Cap's costume appeared to be his more modern duds. This way, the time traveling was still unrevealed by the Marvel marketing team. One of the more shocking and meaningful moments in the finished film takes place on Vormir between Hawkeye and Black Widow. In their effort to gain the Soul Stone, they rush toward the edge of the cliff, fighting over who will sacrifice themselves in order for the other person to achieve the stone. Black Widow ends up falling to her demise, and it's tragically appropriate since she's apparently the better fighter in this instance and Hawkeye still has a family to be reunited with. Originally, Thanos' soldiers were going to appear and attack the 2 heroes. Black Widow was to get hit by enemy fire before falling over the cliff's edge. It overcomplicated a heavy emotional moment and thankfully ended up on the cutting room floor. Well, with these moments in the finished film, Avengers Endgame may have turned out to be an entirely different movie. Luckily for most fans, it ended up being the most satisfying cinematic event they could hope for. But how about you? Were there any moments that you wished made the final cut of the film? Are there any sequences from the final movie that you could have done without? Let us know in the comments section below. And hey, while you're here, hit that subscribe button to keep following ScreenRant for more videos just like this one. We'll MC you later.